Dopamine. It's one of the most famous chemicals in our brain, a real celebrity neurotransmitter. But just like a lot of celebrities, it's also one of the most misunderstood. So today, let's get into it and separate the myth from the molecule. You've heard it everywhere, right? Dopamine is the pleasure chemical. It's why you feel good. But what if I told you that's not really the whole story? What if its real job is something way more fundamental? Something that actually gets you off the couch in the first place? So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll cover the basics, what dopamine actually is. Then we're going to bust that huge myth about pleasure versus motivation. After that, we'll look at all the other critical jobs it has, what happens when things go wrong, and finally, we'll tie it all together and see what it means for you. All right, first things first. Before we can bust any myths, we gotta be on the same page. We need to understand what we're actually talking about here. So, what is this stuff? Okay, at its absolute core, dopamine is a messenger. The best way to think about it is like a text message that's zipping between the nerve cells in your brain. It's a neurotransmitter, and that just means its main job is to carry signals from one neuron to another, telling them what to do. Now, you might have heard that you can get dopamine from foods like bananas. And while those foods do contain it, there's a huge catch. See, your brain has this amazing security system called the blood-brain barrier. Think of it like a super strict bouncer at a club. And the dopamine from your food, it can't get past the velvet rope. So the dopamine that actually affects your mood and your motivation has to be made right there, on site, inside the brain itself. All right, now we're getting to the real heart of it. This is where we take that popular myth we all know and finally set the record straight on dopamine's true superstar role. Come on, we've all seen it online, right? The articles, the posts. Get your dopamine hit. It paints this picture that the chemical is the feeling of pleasure. But what neuroscientists have found is a much cooler, more interesting story. So to really get this, scientists split reward into two totally separate things, liking and wanting. Liking is exactly what it sounds like. It's the pleasure you feel when you bite into a warm, delicious cookie. But wanting, that's the craving, the drive, the thing that made you get up and go to the kitchen for that cookie in the first place. And here's the kicker. Dopamine isn't about the liking. It's all about the wanting. It is the engine of pursuit. So the key idea here is something called motivational salience. Basically, dopamine's job is to scan your environment and highlight things, assigning them a value. It's the little voice in your head that goes, hey, look at that. That's important. Go get it. It's what makes a potential reward seem so desirable that it propels you into action. But wait, there's more. Motivation is just one part of dopamine's job description. This thing is a true multitasker, juggling all sorts of other critical functions in your brain. And get this is an absolutely stunning fact. The human brain has, tens of billions of neurons? Well, only about 400,000 of them actually make dopamine. That's a tiny, tiny fraction. It just goes to show you how a very small group of specialized cells can have this massive, outsized influence over everything we do. In the brain, it really is all about location, location, location. And this just shows you how wide its responsibilities are. I mean, besides motivation, dopamine is absolutely essential for smooth, controlled movement. It's also involved in your high-level executive functions, your ability to plan ahead, to focus, to not procrastinate. It even helps regulate hormones. It is a true master regulator. So how in the world does it do all these different jobs? Well, it uses different pathways, kind of like different highways starting from two main hubs in the brain. One highway starts in a place called the substantia nigra, and that's the one dedicated to controlling our movement. The other highway starts in the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, and this is the famous reward and motivation pathway we've been talking about. Different routes, different destinations, totally different jobs. Okay, so when you have a system that's this powerful and this wide-ranging, it's probably no surprise that when things go wrong, the consequences can be huge. This is a system that needs to be in perfect balance. It really is a Goldilocks situation here. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. The amount of dopamine signaling has to be just right. And when that delicate balance gets thrown off, it can lead to some of the most serious neurological and psychiatric conditions out there. Let's look at some real-world examples. With Parkinson's disease, those dopamine-producing cells in the motor pathway we just talked about, the substantia nigra, they start to die off. That leads to severe problems with movement. Then you have drug addiction, where substances completely hijack that VTA reward pathway, creating an overwhelming wanting that just takes over.
And we also see strong links between altered dopamine levels and conditions like schizophrenia and the attention issues we see in ADHD. It's a really powerful look at what happens when the system is out of whack.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's bring it all home and focus on the big takeaway. What is the one single thing you should remember about dopamine after all this?
If you remember nothing else from this, please remember this. Dopamine is not about the pleasure of getting the prize. It's about the motivation to go on the pursuit. It is the fuel for the journey. It's the anticipation, the drive, the thing that makes us seek, explore, learn, and achieve. It's the engine that gets us going.
So let's just recap the big points. Dopamine's number one job is motivation, not pleasure. It's also a master regulator of our movement and our ability to go after goals. And when that system is out of balance, it's linked to major conditions like Parkinson's, addiction, and ADHD. And maybe most amazingly, it just shows how a tiny group of neurons can have such a huge influence on who we are.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating thought to end on, doesn't it? If our brains are wired to reward the pursuit itself, the act of striving and seeking, that really makes you think. It's not just about the goals we set, but about the value and maybe even the joy we find in the process of chasing them. So, what will you choose to pursue?